Hey, this is Big Lou. And when I'm on the internet, I'm listening to Jack Dapper Blues.
I'm Dietrich Farr, listening to Jack Dapper Blues.
Hey everybody, this is Adam Gusso.
Hi, I'm Veronica Jackson, America's acoustic folk blues singer. You're listening to Jack Dapper Blues.
Hello, this is Ray Brooks. You're listening to Jack Dapper Blues. Hi, this is Guy Davis.
Hey there, folks. This is Don Fleming, the American songster, slapping the dap with Jack Dapper Blues.
Hey everybody, this is Walter Trout, and you are listening to Jack Dapper Blues.
Hey, this is Shamika Copeland.
Hey, I'm Ben Turner of Piedmont Blues. I'm here with Valerie Turner.
And we are bluesing with Lamont Jack Pearlie, the best radio station for true blues.
Hi, I'm Larry Griffin, and I keep it locked and loaded on Jack Dapper Blues. Yes, yes, yes.
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening, blues people? Whoever's listening, do me a favor, jump on the let's see here. I need you to jump on. Yeah, I see it. Let me know if you hear me and if I'm clear. And we're going to definitely rock and roll. We have quite the few things to discuss today. If you see me looking to the side, I got a computer here with some of my notes. Because there's quite a few things we want to talk about today. So the name of today's show, the topic of today's show, why is it always about race, country blues, and blackness, and possibly a little bit of Beyonce, Rihanna, and Giddens, but mostly country blues, and blackness. So before I get started, I want to go down the list on some announcements. First announcement is the African American Folklorist magazine is still taking submissions. One for the print magazine that we're working on now. Two for the website. Now the website submissions are on a rolling basis, meaning we're always accepting submissions for the website. And the submissions for the website usually go up within 7 to 10 days. It is the submissions for the magazine. It does go up. Well, it goes out once published, though, which is what I want you to know. Once published. And right now, we are working on the next physical print issue, and we are still taking submissions. Okay, that's number one. Number two, and that's only if I can get 25 new patrons, and I'm going to give you the link of the Patreon account right now, but if I can get 25 new Patreon subscribers, then I will begin uploading new episodes of the African American Folklorist, Writers, and the Blues. Do y'all remember that program? I did a small installment for that program. It's called African American Folklorists, Writers, and the Blues. It's on the Jack Dapper Blues YouTube channel. So what this is about, this particular series, is it highlights African-American writers, folklorists, ethnologists, ethnomusicologists, anthropologists, archaeologists, writers, composers, playwrights, and the like. all who documented, described, and flat out canvassed the Black experience through their work, connecting the dots between the people, their interactions, their expressions, their vernacular, their music, their culture, and everything that is reflected in the climate of Black America. Now, the initial 3 installments you will find again on the YouTube channel. There's John Wesley Work III, which is the very first one, Leroy Jones, aka Amiri Baraka, which is the very second one, and Zora Neale Hurston. Those are the 3 that are up right now. They've been up for some time. I will go back to producing them, and they're not long drawn out. Okay. 3 to 6 minute episodes. So if I can get 25 new Patreon subscribers, I'll begin to release those on Patreon, obviously. Also, subscribe to Jack Dapper Blues YouTube channel, okay? And sign up for the email mailing list so you can stay current with what we're doing with the organization, what we're doing with the magazine, the upcoming festival, and all the other things that is brewing and we enjoy doing. Right now, who what do we got going on here? Sister Samantha, what's happening? Sister Four, what's happening? We're going to get into it today. We're going to really get into it today because, you know, it's a little troublesome that Beyonce comes out with a song with Sister Giddens, who for me, Rhiannon gives that song credibility. But we have to also remember where Beyonce Knowles comes from, right? And why does that mean anything? So this is not like we're going to break down some stuff here because the issue is, at least for me, a lot of times in this conversations, and this is why the title of the show is, why is it always about race, country blues, and blackness? Well, it's very simple. You make it about race, and right now when I say you, those who are bashing the song that are not melanated, those who are bashing the song, you make it about race. So then I have to remind you that American music, popular music, where it comes from, who it comes from, how it became commodified, and what it was before the commodification, right? So that's one. Two, it also boils down to, and what also boils down to, why is this conversation always ends up, wait, let me put that back up there so y'all can see, why this conversation always ends up about race. And it always ends up about race because Black culture is commodified, repackaged with another face, and then resold to the masses. And when that happens, it's not associated that these musics, these cultures, these traditions that are being sold and bought on the market as American popular music, or more specifically country music, came from Black folk, the blues, reels. We're going to get down to it as much as we can in this frame, in this time frame. Okay. Now, again, just a disclaimer and to be clear, this is not about telling folks who can and cannot participate in the music. That's not what we're doing here at all. Okay? Because what happens on the ground level as culture and cultural expressions are being shared and engaged is way different than when it is filtered, repackaged, and sold to and through the mass market. So, you know, if we're in my backyard and I'm with a diverse group of folk, Thank you. That's my daughter giving me some tea. Of course, by request of her mama. But she know how to make the tea. And I don't know if y'all see, I want to show y'all this. I usually always promote my stuff, but I want to show y'all this. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. I got that in New Orleans at a great brothers spot. It's called Studio B. All right. It's called Studio B. Now, getting back to the work at hand. On the ground level, if I invite some friends over and we sit in my backyard, or if I'm invited over, that's how the exchange happens on a cultural ground level. You know what I'm saying? That's not what I'm talking about. Okay? What I'm talking about is when a culture vulture gets wind of these cultural exchanges, this music that we've been doing for so long, telling stories. Because remember, it comes from a place. There are multiple versions of Black musicians from the inception, right? So there's the holder of the scroll, the tradition bearer, the storyteller, the one that passes down and educates, right? But there's also those that entertain for a living. That's a job. Those who want to entertain, those who are buskers, or those who want to be big and make it, which I don't say that with any malice. That why would you want to stay on the shelf? You want to record an album and have the people buy it, right? But there are so many different versions. The local musician, right, that works at the local whatever, and but hey Johnny, come down, play tonight, man, sing tonight, or you're in church, Sister Lot, please get up and sing that piece. You have that group, right? You have the newspaper group. Who is that? The artist, the musician that goes from Black community to Black community, letting you know what's going on in these other communities. And then again, you have, okay, this is a business, it's a viable business, right? So what can we think about the viable business? Or even before that, right? The hold downs and the barn parties and the things like this, where melanated string musicians will come out, and they're not even playing reels or the blues or what we call songster music. They're playing what's considered old time music, which, like country music, is not necessarily thought about when it comes to Black folk. And I'm going to say Black folk because there's many versions of Black folk in the Americas, at least from like 1325. There's and even prior to that, right? So there's the indigenous Indians who look like African Americans, meaning there's so many different versions. There are actually Africans, then there's Caribbeans, then there's Afro-Cubans. We can go down the list, right? So I'm just going to say Black folk because I don't want Pan-Africans or anyone in any of these groups to think I'm either singling them out, leaving them out, or whatever. I'm Black folk and Black folk narrative, Black folk music. Okay. So there's multiple functions of our musical expression is what I was discussing. Okay. And now when we think about how this is being framed, why is she doing this, and all the foolishness that was said, I don't want to keep just going into that because it's bigger than that. Because this is not something that just happened, right? Remember, Chris Thomas King had to write that open letter because he was snubbed Brother David, what's happening? I'm sorry it took me so long to speak to you. He was snubbed for a blues Grammy. Do y'all remember that? And the question he was asking was, who gets to say what is the blues? The people of the blues? Or those outside of, quote, the folk group? Who gets to say what is blues? So then the question becomes, in this situation or this regard, who gets to say what's country? Well, why does that even matter when it comes to the blues people? Why does it matter when it comes to the blues people? So I'm going to discuss some women. Obviously, I'm going to discuss some women who have been performing and singing country music throughout the whole 20th century and even the late 19th century. But to give context of the roots of a commodified music presented and thought of as a white music, let me say that again to make sure. To give context of the roots of a commodified music presented and thought of as a white music, a non-black music, we can start with Leslie Riddle as an example. Do y'all know who Leslie Riddle is? If you know, before I tell you, I'm gonna drink some of my tea. Before I tell you, I'm going to give you an opportunity to put in the comments if you know who Leslie Riddle is. Do you know who Leslie Riddle is? Yeah, that's my phone going off. Okay. Well, you know what? I'll just tell you. But remember, y'all can chime in as, you know, this episode, and I'm talking about what I'm talking about this. You could chime in. Obviously, in the chat, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, you could chime in. Leslie Riddle was a great musician. He actually is the person who taught the Carters how to play this black music. Oh yeah. So he went with was it John Carter, I believe? I forget the name of the father. He went out with him, right? And what they did was collected songs. But who collected the songs? See, this is the same thing, and I love the Lomaxes, but this is the same thing when it comes to Worth Long. This is the same thing when it comes to John Wesley Work III. Leslie Riddle went with the Carter father to collect black songs as a folklorist, as an ethnographer. He had an innate ability to be able to see and hear the song and then pick it up, play it right back. So as they collect these songs, because they were collecting the songs for the Carter repertoire, Leslie Riddle knew these black folk because he played with them. He comes, if I'm not mistaken, 2-3 generations of musicians, if my memory serves me correctly. I should know this because I wrote the installment for him in Notable Folklores of Color. I'm just really excited right now. Okay. So Leslie Riddle goes out with Papa Carter, with the Carters, collects these songs, And then goes back and teaches the Carter family how to play these songs, and to follow in return, the Carter family would be credited for establishing this particular music that is thought to be white country music, white gospel, white music. It is not thought to be of coming of the roots of black folk whatsoever. Now, Maybelle Carter, Mama Maybelle Carter, and the daughters always let it be known that Leslie Riddle taught them when asked, right? Because he taught her how to play this slide song. And so she did say, oh, well, I learned it from this guy, Leslie Riddle. But I mean, how many of you knew who Leslie Riddle was in comparison to the Carter family? What about Arnold Schultz, who is the roots of bluegrass? Excuse me. Arnold Schultz is the root of bluegrass as we know it, due to him being extremely vital to Bill Monroe's career. Right? So if we give a brief history of blues, country blues, and the inception of country music. And when I say a brief history, we just really calling out some of the genres or what becomes genres established by Black communities and some of the places, right? So if we think about some of the places, let's start with Congo Square in the Trame. You have indigenous, Black indigenous, African, Afro-African, Afro-Cuban, Afro-African, Cuban, Haitian, Creole. That's just in the Trame. The Congo Square. Storyville, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Georgia, South Carolina. According to multiple documents, Negro folk songs were created by enslaved Africans after their arrival in North America between 1619 and 1860. I beg to differ, because Negro folk songs was being sang on the Americas well before this 12 or 18 or 10. How many ever they said came to America in 1619? There was Black folk already here. Swarthy, as if you will, and the different other terminologies. Or in the 15 and 1600s, when they were looking at what was called mahogany tribes and saying that we can bleed the color out of these folk. Well before 1619. So the name of some of these genres, reels, songsters, old time string music, which again, and you know, Leadbelly was a player initially of that style of music before he went to Storyville and started playing blues. Slave seculars. Do you know what slave seculars are? Are you familiar with that? Field hollers, obviously the blues, Black spirituals, and sorrow songs. Now, the spirituals, as you know, are the story of Black people's historical surviving for earth, or striving, if you will, for earthly freedom. In the late 1700s, they sang the precursors of the spirituals, which were called corn ditties. Another term for Black music was reels, like we just said. That term was found in a W.E.B. Du Bois piece titled The Souls of Black Folk, which makes the case of a strong connection between the blues and spirituals, right? He also, in making that connection, gives it another name, sorrow songs. I'm just trying to give the context, right? Excuse me. I'm just trying to give the context because there's also Crabell. I'm believing I'm saying his name correctly. Was it Henry Crabell? Crabell? Henry Crabell. Or Crabell. Crabell? Well, in 1914, he published a book, Afro-American folk songs, which is a study in racial and national music, raising a very interesting point when it comes to Black folk tribal music, which is folk songs is not the popular song in a sense in which the word is most frequently used, meaning it's not pop, it's not popular, it is not what becomes Taylor Swift, if you will. But it is popular as it is the song of the folk. Why is that important? Well, when you think of original country music, it is the song of the folk. It's just that when it was repackaged, what folk? And again, this is not saying, well, you can't, well, at least I'm not saying that. Oddly enough, there's a group of people telling a Black woman that she cannot sing country music, which is, and this is the purpose of me pretty much kind of laying this out. Now, we have to keep something in mind. A lot of history and narrative of the blues people, as well as blues expressions, usually starts post-emancipation and during Reconstruction years, right? So just, if you will, emancipation 1863, Reconstruction period 1865 through 1877, Jim Crow immediately after that, right? So now if you think of man, maybe if you go check out Jack Dapper Blues, I have a article called African American Tribal Music, the Beginning. It breaks a lot of this down. And you can see 1865, 1867, we begin seeing collections of Black folk songs, Negro folk songs by men. But the very first person, to my understanding, to collect, document, and record these songs is Charlotte Fortin Gremke, which I believe she did immediately after emancipation, which is 1864. Okay. Now, it's less popular to find these collections pre and post Revolutionary War. One, because to our understanding, there was no way to literally record it, capture it, outside of writing about it, which happened. So, well, I'm going to tell you, because remember, pre-Revolutionary War and post-Revolutionary War is very significant to the Americas, Black folk, white European folk who were just, right? Why? Well, those against international slavery were living amongst Black folk, and Black folk amongst them. Black folk were playing this music. Post-Revolutionary War, that changes. Okay? So now, with that being said, a book called All God's Children and another book called The Half Have Never Been Told. The Half Has Never Been Told. I speak about these two books often because there's a lot of information in these books. And oddly enough, neither book is about music, but both books document the topical change in Black music, regional Black music and then establishing. What do I mean by establishing? So you have a traveler, a voyager who travels around the Americas documenting and writing, and he hears songs sung by Black folk in one uh, southeast area of the country, possibly Virginia, possibly, and then he hears the same song in New Orleans. Now this is post domestic slave trade, because the domestic slavery changes a lot. But in the formative years of this, there are Black folk songs that are described as country songs. Okay? So now, if you think of folks like Elijah Cox, Henry Thomas, Memphis Minnie, Geechee Wiley, Elizabeth Cotton, Etta Baker, these folk were country musicians. Now, does anybody have any? Please chime in if you will. Chime in if you will. Because today what we're talking about is, why is it always about race? Country blues, and Blackness. Why is it always about race? You know, a lot of people, it's a sensitive topic. I'll say it again. Elijah Cox, Henry Thomas, Memphis Minnie, Geechee Wiley, Elizabeth Cotton, Etta Baker, these folk was country musicians. Elijah Cox played reels, blues, slaves, secular, sorrow songs, easily disseminating songs, a vessel of songs 300 years old. He was not a slave. He was interviewed and documented in Born into Slavery, the slave narratives. His parents were slaves. He was born free. He was a Buffalo Soldier. On his, where he actually was stationed, St. Angelino, no, that's not Angelino, Angelo. But anyway, where he was stationed with former slaves. And they taught him songs that he would carry into the turn of the century, and perform these songs. Same thing with Henry Thomas, Memphis Minnie, Geechee Wiley, Elizabeth Cotton. We create original music, but we also pass or vessels of songs of old. And that's just naming a few that were actually playing country music, country blues. We can discuss pop singers who crossed over, made significant waves that were not Black. However, their style and a lot of what they got came from a Black person, a Black community, a Black church. Elvis went to a Black church. So now I mentioned Charlotte Fortin Gremke, right? John Wesley Work III, I mentioned Paul Dunbar, Elaine Locke, James Weldon Johnson. All of these folk wrote songs, collected songs, or explained Black folk songs, as did Sterling Brown, Langston Hughes, and Zora Neale Hurston. And like many disciplines and many genres of music, and pretty much anything, for the exception of the people I just mentioned, when these things were being looked at from 19th century, turn of the 20th century and on, they were looked at through a white lens, a Western society lens, a Euro lens. possibly not intentional in all cases. However, looking at these things through a white lens, what does that mean? A white eyes, white gaze. Looking at it from the point of view of Western society, European society, white society, whether intentional or not, it removes the roots of its blackness from these musics. It removes the roots of indigenous from its tribal beginnings that are still ever present. Now, in recent months, there had been an issue with some called a new version of country music produced and performed by black folk. There was an article in the Tennessean, I believe I'm saying that right, and I think another one in the Atlantic, right? And again, people have not like, I mean, come on, John Snyder, isn't that his name? Homeboy from Dukes of Hazzard is making statements about Beyonce making a country song. Rihanna Giddens, to me, like I said, gives it more credibility only because of the style of music that she engages in on a consistent basis. But Beyonce's from Texas, bruh. She has black roots. So honestly, her or any other melanated person of American background can perform any American music because it all comes from the same place, the same source. So now, who else were country musicians or did country songs? Rufus Payne. He was known as T-Tot. Ray Charles, Little Richard. Some black women who sang guitars and sang country. Linda Martell, who's in her 80s. God, I hope she's still alive. Who knows who Maddie Mae Thomas is? She was recorded by the Library of Congress while she was in Mississippi State Penitentiary in 1939. Who knows who Maddie Delaney is? She was born in 1905 in Mississippi. She's a blues singer and a guitarist. And to make that distinction, because those of you who know the blues know when it comes to women and the blues is usually presented as a woman in the front ground with a big band behind, a vaudeville style. They don't usually talk about the Memphis Minis and the Maddie Delaneys, who was a straight up guitar slinger and singer. It goes back to what lens are we looking at this through, right? You don't think Ida Cox was a country singer? What about Vera Hall, who comes out of Alabama? Sippy Wallace, who sang a song called Up the Country Blues. Victoria Spivey, Lucille Bogan, or how about my favorite? Wait, hold on. Before I tell you her name, let's go back because I got to show you a picture. Who that is? That's just my baby. I couldn't help it, son. Jessie Mae Hemphill. How many pictures we see of our dear Jessie Mae with a cowgirl hat on, cowwoman hat? What is that telling you? And then here she got a pistol and a long stem cigarette. I mean, to me, I believe they thought of themselves as country singers. Who comes up with these genres and in the name of these genres? Or at least at what point did it switch? Because then we got to think about in the early days, at least the turn of the century. Let's keep it to the turn of the century. Again, from emancipation to the turn of the century, a lot had changed. And most of the conversations when it comes to this is focused in that period. But what happens is, as the trains, vaudevilles, and things like this take precedence in these Black communities, become thriving, you have musicians taking monikers connected to highway routes, traveling routes, regions, because they're marketing their brand and their sound, or at least they're marketing themselves so they can perform, and not just perform, but get, as they say, butts in the seat. And I say that often as well, because for some reason, there are folks who didn't think Black folk was savvy enough, intellectual enough to think about marketing and promotions so that when they come out to perform, they can earn income. I know that sounds ridiculous, right? But see, we have to remember that there are some folk who believes that the way Black people look and the conditions they were living in extreme poverty after the emancipation, and not all, but some, without all the resources, they think that's, the only version of Black. And that's where all this stuff comes from. And that's how Black people should be looking 200-300 years later. It's crazy. Why is it always a race thing? Why is it always about race? Country blues, and Blackness. Because, like I said in the beginning, you make it about race, then you have to be reminded that the roots of American music come from Black folk. I'd go as far as saying, at this day and age, the last 30, 40, 50 years, American Black culture has to be the hottest and most sought after commodity, to the point, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Black culture, American Black culture, and American Black music is the new cotton industry. So now, with that being said, we have to remember, and I just had this conversation with a great filmmaker the other day who was not melanated, but found some interesting things and engaged in the ethnographic method of documenting these Black musicians he met in Tennessee. And he was asking me a couple of questions, and my response was, Black folk have a different naming convention for the things we do and how we present these things, right? So for the most part, and this is not always, but for the most part, if you look up something that says the origins of the blues or the such and such of the blues, nine times, 8 times, maybe 7 times out of 10, it's not written by a Black person. Because we usually, depending on the actual scope of the project, right? Because depending on what the message and point is, then we'll say, okay, blues this, hip hop this, rhythm and blues that, that I'm not saying now wouldn't happen, but for the most part, we usually, in our naming conventions, give a name that necessarily doesn't just describe a particular attribute or aspect of our cultural interaction, but when you read it, you'll see all of these things in there. When you hear it, you'll see all of these, you'll hear all these things in there, So when it comes from a black lens, they may not, even though Ray Charles obviously called it country music, Beyonce obviously called it country music, and they should call it country music, you know. But we may, you can find where we may not even use that term unless we have to use it for commodification purposes, so you know where it lands for business, which is fine. But I mean, country music comes from country blues. If you really, 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 really want the God's honest truth of what the separation between country blues and country music is, race, skin color, class. Remember, there was a thing called race records, and then there was things called records. So if you want to know, I don't know, you walk into a store and you want to know who's the black music and who's the white music, and this is not necessarily now. However, what I am saying, suggesting, or raising as a point, arguing, this happened many years ago, but the remnants of it, the programming of it, the indoctrination of it is still very prevalent. So back in the day, you go into a record store, country blues, country music, same place, looking at the both sides, you would identify, oh, country blues, that's Negroes. Let me go over here to country music. Where do you think country music comes from? Do you listen to Son House, Lightning Hopkins? The women I mentioned, I'll mention them again. Look up Maddie Delaney. Look up Maddie Mae Thomas, Linda Matrell, Vera Hall, if you don't know who that is. Sippy Wallace, if you don't know who that is. Victoria Spivey, if you don't know who that is. Lucille Bogan, if you don't know who that is. Jessie Mae Hemphill, I'll be very disappointed if you don't know who that is. But if you look her up, these women was country musicians. And today, because of all of this, we have something called the Black Opry, where there's like great Kashona. I can't think of everybody off the top of my head. Forgive me. I follow Sonny. I follow all these folk. Great musicians. That's carving a humongous and significant space. As we come full circle to the roots of popular music, country music. Full circle, why is it always about race? Country blues, and blackness? Because country blues indicates black. Country music indicates white. Really that simple. Sister Teeny Turner, I can't wait to work with you. You are a legend, and it's an honor. And I mean, that's just what it boils down to. When now think about it. When they say blues rock, again, these are all dog whistles. These are codes, code words. All right. So remember, Black American, the roots of American music and the roots of a global culture that's commodified the way it is comes from a group of people on the Americas that's been getting exploited for quite some time. And to have the goal to tell a black woman from one of the epicenters of country music anything other than thank you for doing that correctly, or thank you for putting a new spin on it, whatever, however you want to say it. Anything other than that, I mean, come on. Now, I want to run down some of these names again. Males and females, men and women. Remember Leslie Riddle, because if you think about the Carter family, there would be no Carter family if it wasn't for Leslie Riddle. Arnold Schultz, there would be no Bill Monroe if there was no Arnold Schultz. Okay? Storyville, Congo Square, remember that. Okay? Jessie May, Sippy Wallace, Maddie Delaney, Maddie Mae Thomas, remember that. Elijah Cox, Henry Thomas, remember that. I know a lot of you remember Etta Baker and Elizabeth Cotton, but if you don't, continue to remember them. Okay? And let's just please understand. Please understand. One, something really happened between emancipation and the turn of the century. Because when it comes to what I'm discussing and been discussing this entire broadcast and a lot of the work I've talked about, this seems people only focus on that particular moment in time. So that should raise questions. Okay. Also, on the ground level, most of this is not even a problem. Okay. Now, last thing, remember, if I get 25 new Patreons, I will begin uploading and publishing new episodes of African American folklorists, writers, and the blues. Okay? Patreon.com/Jack Dapper Blues. The African American folklorist is still receiving and taking submissions for his upcoming print. And for the website, we take submissions on a rolling basis. Okay? Follow us on all social media platforms. Listen to us on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify. Y'all know what it's about. Okay? Keep bluesing. Do yourself a favor. Don't never tell a black person you're keeping the blues alive, because that's insulting. And remember, all jokes aside, I will never tell anyone that they can't participate in my culture or anyone's culture. But I will tell everyone that you all deserve a representative from your folk group to be the holder of the story and make sure it's disseminated in a proper context. I don't care who you are, where you're from, whatever it is. If it's your people's story, you should be the bearer of it. And if you need an advocate for that, I advocate for that. All right? All right, good folk. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'm going back to transcribing. I want to play some music, literally like pick up my guitar. But anyway, so I'll be talking to you soon. And if you did not have an opportunity to chime in on this live, email, DM, there's something that you want to discuss or have discussed, email, DM. I got some interviews coming up soon. And keep bluesing. Do yourself a favor. Learn about someone besides yourself. And always, 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 even if you do not engage in it, honor the traditions you come from. Peace and love.